Hello, original character designers, and welcome to Circuit Court Entertainment, where we discuss how laws and history affect all forms of media. Usually. Today we are actually looking at the reverse. I'm your host, Mina. Let's get started. Let me ask you, dear listeners, a question. Why did your parents name you that? Names are a very interesting mark of culture. Sometimes people are named after relatives, living or dead, to honor them. Religious parents may name their children after holy figures, but that's easy. What about other people? And more importantly, where do the names come from? Or to get to the point, does media affect name trends? The answer is a resounding yes. For clarification on my stats, the Social Security Administration releases its list of top 1,000 names every year, and you can search previous lists back to 1900. So to research this episode, I basically put names into the chart and looked at what was going on at the time. Anything not from the US or before 1900, I had to look at incidental data. Additionally, since these are just names I know of, there may be a lot of missing data. Also, the SSA chart only tackles the 1,000's most popular names each year, so if any name is less popular, we have no data on it. In addition, I will be collapsing all unique spellings into one name for simplicity's sake, and I am focusing on names where parents can get away with it being a stealth fandom nod, i.e. I'm not looking at names like Naruto or Sherlock. Cool? Let's get started. One of the most interesting ones is the name Madison, in that it didn't exist before 1985. It burst onto the chart at the 685th place, but how did it come to exist? The Tom Hanks movie Splash. In 1984, Splash was a surprise hit for Disney under its label Touchstone. It made around $211 million adjusted for inflation, or just slightly more than Sahara, though its budget was significantly lower. Splash tells a remixed version of The Little Mermaid in it, and the mermaid character, casting about for a name at one point, and hiding the fact that she is actually a mermaid, sees the sign for Madison Avenue and picks it as her first name. It peaked in the year 2002 at number 3, but is still very high on the list this year, coming in at number 36. Madison in the movie is a sweet but complicated character who puts a lot of trust in Tom Hanks' character. But she does get her happy ending. I watched it during the early days of COVID, and it's a charming rom-com from when Tom Hanks first started on his role as a movie star. Another interesting one is Mabel, and that Mabel actually fell off the chart. The last year it appeared was in 1964 until it reappeared in 2013, where it exploded onto the chart, coming in at 711, after roughly 50 years of fading popularity. What caused the change? Another easy one, Gravity Falls. Gravity Falls was an animated show on Disney Channel, and it averaged 1.8 million views an episode, though its Nielsen ratings are a complex topic. And it's successful enough that even 10 years after its finale, merchandise is still coming out. Gravity Falls debuted in 2012 and follows twin siblings Mabel and her brother Dipper on their summer adventure with their great uncle in a small town filled with mysteries. Mabel is outgoing, boisterous, kind, but can be a bit harsh since she's 12, and she loves her family. Dipper did not chart, but Stanley, their great uncle, who's a con man with a heart of gold, did get a brief burst of popularity, moving from 737 on the chart to 680 before dropping again. Mabel's name was sometimes mocked for being an old lady's name, but it continues to rise, boistered by Only Murders in the Building's savvy and fashionable Mabel, played by Selena Gomez. Only Murders debuted in 2021, and while we don't have numbers, everyone is happy enough to give it multiple seasons, which is really impressive as a streaming show in the current era. With 2 well-received characters sharing that name, Mabel continued its upward trend from 428 to 375. Not bad for a name that wasn't even on the chart less than 10 years ago. The name Wendy also got a brief burst in popularity during Gravity Falls, though it is close to fading off the chart now, which is interesting. as Wendy as a female first name exists due to one book, Peter Pan. Yes, before Peter Pan existed, the given name Wendy for a woman was just not a thing. Wikipedia is listing that it came from the child of a friend of the author mispronouncing friendly as Wendy, though I've also heard speculation it is some sort of a nickname or a shortening of Gwendolyn or Guinevere. And yes, I'll get to Arthurian stuff later. A surprising one is the name Leon, connected mostly with the game series Resident Evil. While Leon Scott Kennedy, while yes, he was named by a Japanese development studio, debuted in 1998's Resident Evil 2, the name had been in a downturn since its peak in 1926. It also dates as far back as ancient Greece. But in 2006, it reversed its fortunes and jumped a full 22 points on the chart, to be ranked at 502 and continues to climb to this day, with it coming in at 148 last year. And what happened in 2005? The release of Resident Evil 4, a game that was not wildly popular on its initial release, but is now one of the most popular, influential, and widely available games in the world. Like, it rivals Doom for a number of official ports, which has led that version to sell 12 million copies. And that's before we get into the 2023 remake. Leon in Resident Evil 4 swapped out his naive and well-meaning cop persona for a successful attempt at being a brave action hero with cool one-liners, which fell flat, but that just made him all the more charming. Staying with the boys, but switching to books, we will look at the name Edward. It's been on a slow decline for a while, not in any real danger of dying, but do you know what was the number one name at the same time Twilight came out in 2005? Jacob. Now, Jacob does have the advantage of being a biblical name, which means that people may not be naming their kid Jacob solely due to Twilight. But it was the number one boy's name from 1999 to 2012, and even now is ranked only 36th. And the series sold over 160 million copies, not counting readership from libraries and movie sales. Living through Team Edward and Team Jacob, it was a name that was very much in the public consciousness. A similar phenomenon can be found with the name Jasmine. It debuted on the charts in 1973 at 863 and rapidly rose. It hit number 30 in 1989, only 16 years later, stayed in the 20s until 2007, where it fell to 32. While the success and popularity of Aladdin and its box office of roughly $1.1 billion after inflation, or almost 6 times that of Sahara, along with Jasmine being a confident, clever, kind, and brave princess, cannot be marked as a unique contribution to the name's popularity, it does seem to have contributed to its longevity and normalization of it as a name. This does go both ways, though, where names given to less popular or admirable characters can cause the name to suffer in the rankings. For example, the name Patrick has been on a steep decline. While it did peak in 1968, the drop-off got pretty steep after it was attached to a less than admirable character, namely Patrick Star in SpongeBob SquarePants, which debuted in 1999. As of 2023, it is still a decent 224, but that's a far cry from its peak of 30. Though with SpongeBob still in the air and being one of Nickelodeon's best-rated shows, we'll see how that changes as the initial audience has kids of their own. And let's be real, American Psycho's lead Patrick Bateman probably did not help matters. In a similar matter, the name Taylor, which had been on a slow downturn starting in 1996, where it peaked at 6 on the chart, dropped off rapidly after Taylor Swift gained her own popularity. While it stayed steady from 2008 to 2009, Fearless's release date, it then dropped 14 spots next year, from 22 to 36, and the downturn has only gotten steeper. This is clearly something humans do. To go back to Arthurian names, I've checked people named Lancelot to 1278, and that's about 150 years after the first version of what we would consider Arthurian stories existed. Guinevere was off the charts for most of its existence, but did creep back in 2021 and 2022. Arthur is starting an upswing again. And sometimes it's delayed. The name Bruce peaked in 1952, 13 years after Batman debuted. Considering the age range of initial Batman readership, I would not be surprised if a few of those new parents read Batman when it debuted in 1939 and decided to name their kid Bruce after the smartest, coolest, richest, most amazing superhero ever. To a kid. I think in the end, it goes back to why we give names. Sure, sometimes it sounds pretty, or reminds us of something in nature, or it just has a wish we have for our kid. But when we are named after someone, be that a relative or religious figure, or someone we watched and read about, I think we hope that the kid will carry some of that into their lives. To be as outgoing as Mabel Pines, as smart as Bruce Wayne, as wise as Wendy Darling, as chivalrous as Lancelot du Lac, mostly, as kind as Princess Jasmine, as brave as Leon Scott Kennedy, and maybe, yes, as pretty as Madison the Mermaid. It's one last wish to bestow on the kids before they go out into the world and we find out who those kids truly are, and if they carried any of the power of those names with them. Thank you for listening to Circuit Court Entertainment. If you found this episode interesting, please tell others as this is a new podcast. Please subscribe and leave a review on all the major podcast services. You can find me on Twitter at CCEPod and Tumblr at Circuit Court Entertainment. This episode was written, edited, and recorded by me, Mina. The script was edited by CJ Peterson. Podcast art by Empress Cirque on Twitter. Thank you for your time, and I hope to hear from you soon.